Welcome to Celebrity Interviews with Paul. I have with me Dr. Katie Monsen. Dr. Katie Monsen is a lecturer at the University of Santa Cruz, home of the world famous Banana Slugs, the fighting Banana Slugs. And she lectures on environmental studies. And her greatest claim to fame beyond all of that, the thing that I know that she's most proud of is she is my cousin.
Top of my list. I put
Absolutely.
it on my resume.
It's on your Vita, your CV, right? Well, welcome, Katie. Good to have you here.
Great. Thanks for having me, Paul.
How is life in the pandemic for you and your family?
It is intense. Is really good that we have spent a lot of time working on our relationships leading into this, because we are all here and we're in 900 square feet together all the time. I know that there are people with much smaller places than we have, but it's pretty cozy for standard, for a lot of people.
That's pretty tight for 4 people to live in. And now you are in California, so you can get outside every now and again. You got that going for you.
We
least,
do.
Right?
We do, and we do that a lot. We go up in the redwoods, which are just blocks away, and we go down to the ocean, which is like a mile the other way. And
so everybody wants to live in California, isn't
it? That's right. It's pretty, and today it's really hot. Let's see, which here means it's in the 80s today. I think it's cruising to the 90s today, but that's pretty rare. So
yeah, that's in Michigan. If it gets over 75, people wilt like lettuce, as I say. So
yeah.
Now you teach a bunch of courses. 2 of them are freshwater and wetland ecology and agroecology and sustainable agriculture. And one of the things I found interesting looking through the syllabi and the kind of course descriptions is that in both cases, you want people to look at like a creek and not just see the creek, but see like everything from the ocean to the headwaters and see it all kind of how it all works together. And when people see a field or a field with crops in it, you want people not to just see the field with the crops in it, but like to see like the soil and where the soil came from and how it became what it was, right? So that's part of your goal in those courses, right?
Right, totally.
So how do you get people, because we're used to like, that's a creek, there it is, and that's a field. How do you get people to think in a bigger way and see all those connections?
Right, and luckily I have them captive for 10 weeks and I'm holding a course grade out in front of them at the end of that. So there's a little motivation there, right? And let's see, I put those descriptions in there really on purpose so that at the start of the quarter, as we started at the beginning of the quarter with a lot of the basics, like for freshwater ecology, what are the properties of water? How does water work again? I know this is stuff you've heard before, but let's review that, and heating and cooling and flow and all these kinds of things. And that can be a little bit dry. And then we start getting into, even though it's a wet subject, I guess it's a little dry. And then we start getting into types of water bodies, what makes a creek or a river, and what are different kinds of lakes. And so we kind of have to go through all this technical stuff. But I really want them to have that bigger picture. So I put it in there. And then what I've also done is, because we live in California and we can do this, and I usually teach this in the fall, but this year it's moved to winter in case we can be outside again. But we go on field trips all the time in class. It's only a 65-minute class, but we walk out into there are 3 main water courses on our campus, and so we go to those. I just really want to start right away, like showing them complex systems and then going back and doing the details and going back and forth. And so I try to integrate across that all the time. And because I'm in environmental studies, our department is explicitly, we look at both natural and social sciences. So it's totally part of our world up there to talk about social issues as well as like.
So if you're talking about a creek flowing through the University of California, Santa Cruz, what kind of social issues come into that conversation?
There are, let's see, when we're doing those there are fewer, there are some.
Well,
one can be looking at the
yeah, in any of the rivers, what kind of social issues do you look at when you're talking about it? Is it just like massive pollution, or is it damming and that kind of stuff, or what sort of issues do you come across?
Yeah, and it depends on the water body. So what I have them do is they all do case studies, and then they present their case studies in class. And so they're learning about particular water bodies that way. And so, right, sometimes it's massive pollution, like in the Ganges. The Ganges has incredible pollution.
Mm-hmm.
It's immense. And sometimes it's water rights. They're like, who owns the water and does it even get to flow to the sea anymore? And how do we deal with farmers needing it versus ecosystems needing it versus cities wanting it? Like, how do we work across those, especially in California where we don't have summer rains, right? And then
right.
how do we?
Yeah, and you have people that own the water, and other people own the stream bed.
Let's see. I don't teach that
like
class, so I don't know as much about the water rights. And what I know about the water rights is they are complicated and old and a mess.
That's a good summary.
And so, yeah, and in other places, it might be like in the far north, like where like in Canada, where rivers have been used as transport avenues for communities in the winters, and now as it's warming and they're not as available, what does that mean? So there can be all kinds of different. Or the Missouri, how many dams are on the Missouri and what that means for silt in the water. So when they write their paper, they write about the geology of it and like, how did this lake or river form? And then they write about the ecology, so the animals and plants that live in the area. And then they also write about the whatever the social issue is for that place.
So you also talk about like sustainable food practices and things like that too, like creating sustainable agriculture. And before when we were talking, you said something like, I was talking about big agribusiness, and you said it's sort of an illusion of a success. I think you alluded to that. Why would you say that?
Well, that it looks like it's working right now. We're feeding a lot of people right now, but we're feeding people at the expense of our future, because the practices we rely on degrade the soil for the most part, and they pollute the waterways. And
so what kind of things degrade the soil? What kind of things that we do?
Just plowing it every year, and it doesn't have, and using, if we rely on chemical inputs for fertilizer, for example, then we're not building up the soil with organic matter. And it's building the soil organic matter that
creates a longer term sustainability then. But then you can't use the field every year. So then you need more land to farm, right?
You can. People have been working on ways of doing this. And of doing cover crops in off seasons, or there, and in California that's easier in some ways, but there are cover crops you can plant in the Midwest too. There's lots of work on that there.
What about but how do we, so when we talk about some of these more sustainable practices, can we scale those up? I mean, it's one thing like, to have my little backyard garden be organic, or like, when we were in Virginia, Joel Salatin had a farm, a well-known farm that he had, grass-fed beef and had chickens and hogs that ate the remnants of everything, and then some crops and things like that. It was all organic and all. Well, it wasn't certified organic because that was a different issue, but it was a pretty small scale too. are we able to scale those kinds of things up, or does that mean are we going to like not be able to have beef every night for dinner?
I think, yes, we do have to move to more plant-based diet. That is definitely out there as one of the major ways that we need to work on climate issues, is less, because we have a lot of production now, but a lot of waste occurs going from grain to animal and water. And it's not just in California, but the Ogallala Aquifer, which is underlying a huge part of the Midwest, that faces shortages in places. We've been mining our groundwater just as we would mine anything that's under the ground.
And we're not letting it be replaced.
Right. What we're taking out is greater than putting back in. And it depends on where in the Ogallala Aquifer. And it's huge. It's like Texas up through, it's huge. I don't even remember where it totally goes, but if I looked at a map, I could do this, but I'm not looking at a map. But it goes totally up into the western Midwest, right?
Okay.
And so some places it is recharged, and in some places it's not. And it's just like your bank account. If you're taking out more water than you're putting in, you're going to run out. There's only so much of that stored underground.
Right.
And so if we spend all this energy and water and fuel growing corn and harvesting corn and transporting corn and processing corn that we then feed to animals that then have to go through their own whole life stage and water use and energy use, it's a huge, massive use of energy.
So if we're going to have an impact so individually, that would mean, like, if not, like, maybe starting by eating a little less meat, maybe having like a meatless Fridays, Meatless Mondays. Is that a start?
Yeah.
And
that's totally a start.
It's a start. What else? What are some other things individuals can do?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, part of it is that we need system-wide change, but system-wide change happens because more individuals do things, and then it gets moved into legislation and beyond.
So do we reduce? So for example, if we could reduce federal subsidies on the beef industry, that would raise beef prices, which would reduce the number of people buying beef at some point, which would then reduce our beef consumption, which is probably good for everyone's health, in addition to being good for the planet. Right.
And like increase the amount of spending federally on organic research is tiny. It's so minimal compared to everything else, yet the organic sector is this huge growth area.
Right.
And really it should get, for us to be able to scale this better, we need that happening more. And even that said, during this pandemic, I literally have been fed by my local food system. We don't have local toilet paper here in Santa Cruz, which is, a different story, but I literally, there's a farm up the road that I immediately got a CSA from. And so a community supported agriculture share. So every week I have a box of veggies. Our local bakery put together a shelter box where you would get bread and other goods every week. And then our farmers markets were still able to stay open and just spread out and distanced. And so we have a lot of that here, but there are a lot of communities that have more local food than you would realize. And so I think it's really part of scaling up will be enabling some of the students in my class, not everybody in my classes wants to farm, but some people do, finding ways for them to be able to farm in more places with more small scale agriculture, I think is really going to help scale.
And if the farmer can do what some farmers have done, and that is sell directly to consumers and cut out a lot of the middlemen, then they can make more of the profit themselves, and that makes that more sustainable too. Because obviously the farmer has to be able to, feed their own family, pay their own bills, buy their tractor or whatever equipment they're going to use, all that kind of stuff too. So Awesome.
Absolutely. And we have one farm up here that has one strawberry farm is with the United Farm Workers. And so they have, they're certified through the United Farm Workers. I guess that's right. But are signed on with them.
Well,
So there's labor too, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in my congregation, the other week, I told them that we're in the wilderness, and I think there are three things that we need to remember in the wilderness. We need to learn in the wilderness. First is that we're all in this together, and secondly, that it's going to take a lot longer than we hoped. But thirdly, that there are opportunities for us that are unique now in the pandemic, and I think that all of that applies not just to in the pandemic, but to life in general. And maybe we talk about climate change, it's going to impact all of us one way or another. And it's going to take a long time to adapt, adjust, or change anything. And it's been a long time coming. It's going to be a long time changing. And yet there are great opportunities there for us to do things. And it seems like that's all part and parcel of that too. And there's so many little pieces to all this too. Yeah, you were saying?
Yeah, and like I saw that the Boise Farmers Market, what they decided to do was do drive up. You would pre-order things.
Mm-hmm.
They would send out what's available, and you would pre-order and then drive up, and a volunteer would bring your goods to your car. And they actually said that they have more people using it than before. That there are people that maybe were intimidated by going to a farmer's market, feeling like they maybe wouldn't fit into that scene, that then started using this method. And so there are things we maybe haven't thought of before and are needing to think of in new ways.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time, Katie. I really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you. It's always wonderful to see you. I do have one more question, and that is, where do you find joy?
Yes. Again, it's really good that we have developed our relationship so much in this household, because luckily there's a lot of joy here, even as we continue to rub each other's corners off and help each other become better, kinder humans.
Yeah.
And then again, just being here in Santa Cruz, I mean, we have a little tiny speck of a garden at our condo, but we have peppers and lemons and amaranth and corn and beans. And I mean, these are like one or two plants of these things, but from our little garden, from the food system around me, and going to the big trees and the ocean.
Awesome.
That's where
Thank you, Katie. It's great talking to you.
Thanks, Paul. Likewise.